Do you understand that there's a first quarter and a second quarter, and when you take first and second and you average them together,
understand he took
you
over
get a
in the first
number
quarter,
that is
and the first full quarter of his
1.2%.
administration was the
I mean,
second
these
quarter?
are just
Abby,
numbers.
expectations.
It's just math we're talking
Why
about.
are you
Scott.
down-talking the United
Why
States?
are you fighting about math? It's just math. Okay?
Why are you fighting the policies that are working?
Because
Go ahead.
But a reduction in barriers to entry for U.S. products into the EU. And
They didn't touch
that
any
is
of those
That
things,
is
and that is
reality.
also a fact, Jamal.
You all can laugh, but
There's a
GDP
difference
is
between
3%.
talking
The
points and
market's at,
facts,
the
and it
market's at
sounds
record
like...
highs. People are
Hold on.
investing in America. I don't,
Okay.
This doom and gloom of
Scott, let me clear this up.
It's now
Let me clear this up for you, Scott. What you just said were talking points. What she just said were facts.
That is the highest price increase in a 6-month period that we've seen in any 6 months since in the last 4 decades, absent the pandemic. So prices are already going up. The problem is that tariffs are a terrible way to raise tax revenue because they're borne disproportionately by low and middle income people who consume the most of what they own.
And weren't we at this when you were
And Ronald Reagan,
checking
Scott,
every
I know because we've talked about him in the past, he famously said, we shouldn't actually call this stuff protectionism. We should call it destructionism. Because what it does is it costs the American economy jobs, and it costs us the opportunity to grow.
Hello, everybody. Guys, let's get right into this segment. We got Scott Jennings. Every time anyone critiques Trump, it's like a reflective reaction with him. He cannot take it. He freaks out. It's like he has a crush on him or something. Check this out. There's a lot to get to, and we'll talk about it.
Donald Trump's permanent tariffs were supposed to take effect in 2 hours, but instead the president announced new tariffs on dozens of nations, taking effect in a week. He also upended the entire strategy. There will now be a 10% tariff on countries that have trade surpluses with the U.S. For countries that have a trade deficit, 15%. More than a dozen countries have higher rates because of trade deals that they already negotiated or because Donald Trump just said so. So, as for the two of America's biggest trading partners, he is giving Mexico 90 more days to make a deal. Canada, not so lucky, as Trump is raising their tariff rate to 35%. A Canadian official says Canada shouldn't settle for anything less than the right deal. Now is not the time to roll over. We need to stand our ground. Joining us in our fifth seat at the table is Natasha Sarin, president of the Budget Lab at Yale. Natasha, has there been any deadline that has been set on trade by this administration that has actually been kept?
So we do continue to see the can being kicked down the road. And for those keeping track at home, the effective tariff rates have changed more than 100 times on more than 40 days in this administration.
100 times?
Where we are now.
How's that even possible?
Where we are now, after a slew of changes today, is that you are going to see effective tariff rates of over 18% at current levels. That's relative to 2.5% when President Trump took office. My colleagues and I at the Budget Lab at Yale have estimated what the impact of that is going to be on the economy. And what we've concluded is that you're going to see price increases for the average American family of around $2,400 annually, and a smaller economy because less growth and less investment in this country means fewer jobs by around 0.5 percentage points of GDP, which is about $150 billion. That boils down to like $1,000 out of every American family's pocket because the economy is going to be smaller than it would have been in the absence of this trade war.
Maybe that explains why Josh Hawley wants to hand out $600 rebate checks for the tariffs that people are going to be paying now.
Yeah, I don't know about that idea because part of the issue of bringing in the tariff money.
And that idiot said it's only for Republicans. Like, these people, this is what I mean. Republicans are pretty brainless.
Is to help alleviate some of our national debt, I think, and to pay for other priorities. I mean, I hear your talking points, but look, GDP came in at 3%.
Those are also
You all can laugh, but
there's a
GDP
difference
is
between
3%.
talking points and facts,
The market's at record highs. People are investing in America. I don't.
Okay,
this doom and gloom.
Scott, let me clear this up.
Let
Let me clear this up for you, Scott. What you just said were talking points. What she just said were facts.
GDP is 3%. The market is up. Companies are deals are being cut.
GDP is 3%. GDP this year so far, for the first 2 quarters of this year, is an average of 1.2%. For all of 2024, it was 2.8%. So really, we're actually growing at on average at and I don't even want to overstate this, but if you're using GDP as a metric,
it just came out.
I'm just pointing out that if you look at it over the course of the time that Donald Trump has been in office, the number is not a terribly impressive number. But let me let Natasha respond because
to Abby's point about the 3% that you're quoting, Scott, I think it's actually really quite important to put it in context. So here are some more numbers. It's true that growth at this point last year was more like 2.4%. It's also true that in November, when we predicted what growth was going to look like based on the economic trajectory, we were anticipating growth in the first half of this year of around 2.2%. What we've actually seen is growth at around 1.2%, and that is
what was it in the last quarter? It was 3%
Scott,
after his policies fully took
I think it would
office.
be useful.
I mean, Scott, do you
what?
understand that there's a first quarter and a second quarter, and when you take first and second and you average them
Do you
together,
understand he took
you
over
get a
in the first
number
quarter,
that is
and the first full quarter of his
1.2%.
administration was the
I mean,
second
these
quarter?
are just
That'd be
numbers.
the expectation.
It's just math we're talking
Why
about.
are you
Scott.
down-talking the United
Why
States?
are you fighting about math? It's just math. Okay?
Why are you fighting the policies that are working?
Because
Go ahead.
Republicans hate math, Abby. That's one thing right? It's not just science. They hate math. They hate facts because it goes against their nonsense talking points. Like, why are you down talking America is what Scott said there. What he really meant to say, what they always like to say is, why do you hate America? Or what he truthfully feels probably in his heart is, why are you down talking my baby boo Trump? But when Biden was in office, Republicans were crying and screaming, America's economy is going to hell and all this garbage. Scott is a cultist. Plain and simple, he provides nothing but a creep in the corner, making weird faces and blowing kisses to Trump, never providing any true substance. He tries to derail conversations. He's an idiot. Guys, this happens every single time Republicans come into office. The economy either gets worse or goes into recession. You can look up that data. They don't know what they are doing. So the economist there, she said $2,400 a year extra because of these tariffs. That's about $200 extra a month. And that's obviously going to hurt more the less income you have coming in, obviously. Which also, those same lower income people, millions will lose their Medicaid because of this big dumbass bill Trump signed that gave over 70% of the benefits of the tax cuts to the top 10% of income earners. This is where it gets fantastic. Republicans, who on average make less money than Democrats, are the ones that are obviously going to get screwed the most. And guess what? Even after that, even after Trump was shown to be an extremely likely, very likely child abuser or accomplice at the very least, Trump's support amongst Republicans went up a slight bit. A wise man once said, you just can't fix stupid. We're going to get into more of that later.
Most Americans don't speak math. Most Americans aren't Yale economists. Most Americans don't speak acronyms, GDP, 5%, 2.8%, 4%. We don't talk like that. You just said it's going to cost us probably around $2,500 more per family per year or per person per year?
Per family per year.
Per family per year. So the costs are going up because of these tariffs. And I think what most people don't understand is tariffs are paid. We've been confused by it a lot. Tariffs end up being put onto the consumer. The company that imports the thing, brings it in, they pay the tariff. The tariff is then passed on to the consumer. We pay more. So all these numbers that we're throwing around, the regular American doesn't understand 2.8 to 1.6. They do understand if groceries go up, if housing goes up, if the cost of their goods go up. They understand it like that. And what we're saying is the choices this administration has made will make our costs go up.
Congressman, just on a very basic level, just the breaking news tonight, which is that just shy of this deadline that Donald Trump himself said, he has now changed the rules of the game yet again. And just from a business perspective, how on earth is any business in this hemisphere or anywhere around the world supposed to understand how they should proceed, where they should do business, where they should manufacture their goods, who they can sell to? How are they supposed to understand that when it keeps changing?
Well, as I said, when the president announced these tariffs way back in April, that as a short-term negotiating tool, this could be very effective. And what we have already seen with Japan, with China, with Vietnam, with Thailand, with the EU, is massive trade deals trillions of dollars of investment into the United States that, by the way, would not have happened but for using the leverage of tariffs to force these countries to negotiate better trade deals.
I think that is very debatable. I just want to point out.
Where do you think these trade deals came from?
Well, no, many people question whether the investment will happen and whether the investment is actually real or whether they're counting investments that were already going to happen. It's funny. Some of it could be funny math. So let's just leave it at.
So that's funny math when these countries are announcing that they are coming to terms to invest in the United States. When they're talking about reducing trade barriers and barriers to entry into their countries.
They have a real reason. They have a real reason to want to do that.
Of course, because they want to lower tariff rates.
Trust but verify. Promises of investments need to be verified. You know why? Because in the first Trump administration, there were similar promises, and a lot of them did not come to fruition. So that's why I think there's a healthy degree of skepticism.
Let's see what happened with, for instance, the tariffs that were put on China. What did the Biden administration do? They not only kept them, they tried to increase them. If you look at the fact that countries have...
Because tariffs that are targeted make sense, you idiot. To tariff a whole nation and all the products, that's the stupidity. Like, why do they act like they don't understand this when it's been said hundreds of times now?
Have agreed to investment into the U.S. Businesses have repatriated dollars into the U.S. You are seeing economic growth, as Scott pointed out rightly. Q2 was the first full quarter of President Trump's administration. You just got the tax bill done at the end of Q2. The tax bill is going to provide real tax relief to thousands of dollars to the average American family. In my district, for instance, with the increased cap on salt, 90% of my district will be able to fully deduct their state and local taxes. That is a massive tax cut, a $6,000 tax deduction for seniors. That is massive.
But this is based on the numbers that have changed 100 times in 40 days, right?
Look,
you are basing these numbers on something that constantly changes based on the whim of one person.
You're worried about the strategy. At the end of the day, the question is, what is the end result? And what you're seeing is countries are cutting deals with the United States of America. Businesses are reinvesting in the United States of America. Job growth is up. GDP is up. Consumer price index is down.
Yeah,
Let me
make a couple of quick.
Whoa. Let's blow the whistle on that one, like too short. This segment is from Thursday night. The next day, which would have been this past Friday, the job reports was revised, like it always is, and only 73,000 jobs were created, which is the lowest since the pandemic. I'm going to make a video about that tomorrow. I think I am, tomorrow morning. In fact, he ended up firing that labor secretary that provided those job numbers. Trump did. Like, I've said this before. When it comes to Republicans, they don't have a spine and are so power hungry. Even the pundits, they're afraid of Trump. So they just don't ever push back. Could you imagine Biden doing something like this? Attempting to hide economic numbers by firing labor secretary, and obviously he's going to put a MAGA cultist in there. And on a slightly side note, there's a level of stupidity and mental deficiency that just can't be fixed in this country, in my belief, which is just the Republicans and conservatives. And I actually think it's not worth trying to. These people are okay with shooting themselves on their own foot if they think it's owning the left. Like, these people are not all there. It's best to focus on those like independents and Democrats that sat out, that can be swayed one way or another, to show them how much of a joke the other side is. Even on the thing like the economy that they talk about that they're the best in, they're absolutely shit at it. And I think it's the best tactic to try to keep them away from power as much as possible. Like I said, they're legit not all there.
Points and just in response to that, business investment is down. Consumer spending is up, but just a tick, not a huge amount. This other thing is, what is the end goal in your view of the tariff policy? Because I understand the investments, but when you look at the numbers that we're looking at today, Donald Trump says tariffs are good, so you would expect him to want tariffs to be sky high because they're good in his mind. But what he's done is he's brought tariffs down, whether or not you've negotiated with him or not. So what's the point of a negotiation with Trump when he's just going to pick a random number?
What he is doing is forcing these countries that have forever had barriers to entry to U.S. goods, that have had tariffs on U.S. products. Okay. He is forcing them to renegotiate.
Yeah,
and
but
when you have,
let me give you a concrete example.
When you have the EU that has put price controls on U.S. prescription
the EU
drugs,
is a great. I'm glad you brought it up, Congressman, because the EU is a great example. He brokered a deal with the EU. The Americans are paying higher tariffs, okay? 15% or so now on most goods. They did not renegotiate pharmaceutical prices, agricultural barriers, digital services taxes. They didn't touch any of those things in the EU deal. Why not?
Again, the tariffs are on if you're importing goods from the EU. What we have been able to secure is not only investment from the EU, but a reduction in barriers to entry for U.S. products into the EU.
They didn't touch any of those things, and that is also a fact. Jamal,
let's talk about U.S. products for a second. I've been spending a lot of time in my home state of Michigan, right? So right now, people in Michigan are worried because the president has blown up the USMCA. Right, so auto companies are about at the end of their inventory about the cars they already have stocked. Now they're going to have to go make new cars. They got to buy new parts. Those parts are moving back and forth across the border between Canada and Mexico and the United States. At the same time, what's going to happen as imported cars go up? They're worried that the used car price is also going to go up because people can't afford new cars anymore, which means they're going to all be in the used car market. So people who are lower income are going to have to pay higher money, higher prices in order to buy a used car. These are having real-life impacts. Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan just did a whole release talking about the impact on people trying to go back to school and what this is going to do to school supplies. This is all going to have real impacts on families, and I think the president is arbitrary in the way he's doing this. And companies can't predict. Families can't predict. It's going to have real impacts on American companies and workers.
So we want to know, as a nation, the Fed certainly wants to know, what's the trajectory of prices in the United States? And up until now, it's been TBD because Trump's tariff threats have not really actually been carried out. Based on what he announced today, let's say the 7-day window holds. What are you seeing, Natasha?
So, a couple of pieces that are quite important. One is that we are already seeing higher tariff rates. The effective tariff rate in June and July was closer to 10%. They're going to go way up now. But we are also seeing, as Scott was pointing out, tariff revenue as a result of those higher tariff rates. But what we are also seeing, and what we learned today, is that inflation is ticking up exactly in the sectors that are exposed to these tariffs. So durable goods inflation in this country, that's stuff like your furniture, or it's stuff like your child's stroller or their car seat. Prices have ticked up 1.7%. I know those numbers are, but to give you some context, that is the highest price increase in a 6-month period that we've seen in any 6 months since in the last 4 decades, absent the pandemic. So prices are already going up. And the result of these effective tariff rates that are now going to be more than twice what we've had in the last few months is that prices are going to go up even more. It's true, Scott, that we're going to be collecting revenue. And to your point, we have real fiscal needs and we need to collect revenue. My problem isn't that we are going to have more tax revenue in this country. My problem is that tariffs are a terrible way to raise tax revenue because they're borne disproportionately by low and middle income people who consume the most of what they own.
And weren't we at this rate the last time around 1934? And remember what happened in the 1930s?
We do. We have a trajectory and a history of experience.
For those of you
and
who are
Ronald Reagan,
checking your
Scott,
history books.
I know because we've talked about him in the past, he famously said, we shouldn't actually call this stuff protectionism. We should call it destructionism, because what it does is it costs the American economy jobs and it costs us the opportunity to grow.
All right, Natasha Sarin, on that note.
You saw how sad Scott got? Guys, I don't know. I have an idea that no one has ever said before. It's really 4-dimensional thinking. Should we possibly, probably, maybe tax the effing rich a fair rate instead of giving them tax cuts? I don't know. Wouldn't it make sense that we don't take more money from the group that has the least, but the group that has the most? Like, check these out. I need to show these charts every time we talk about this. This is especially for conservatives where words, I think, are just hard to follow for them. Guys, look at this chart. This is from 2022, which it got only worse since then. Does it make any effing sense to take away money from the bottom 50% of the population? Look at that. who hold only 2.8% of the wealth? Or does it make sense to try to tax and take the money that this country needs from the people that have, I don't know, 70% of the wealth, which is the top 10%, which the top 1% has like something like 40% of that? It's something ridiculous. Like, this is just stupidity, greed, cruelty. Let's check out this next chart. I mean, Diablo, like, look at this. The red line is the top 1% since 1980. It just skyrocketed. Look at everyone else's income. I wonder how that happened. You know what that bald idiot Kevin O'Leary said? They just work harder. Why you want to punish the people that work the hardest? So we're all just lazy guys. And all of a sudden, according to him, after the 1980s, you guys just became all of a sudden more smarter than everyone else. How insane is that? Let's get back. I've mentioned this before. I work in finance, more specifically in investment research. Broadly, I can tell you, please save your money. Be frugal. It's not worth the risk of Trump at the helm of this economy. Don't go on that vacation if you don't have to. Don't spend anything you don't have to. I know this is common sense, but if you have a job, do whatever you can to keep it, right? Go above and beyond, as annoying as that may be. Companies are cutting back, and they're just seeing what's coming. They're going to say things like we're using AI more, but it's really firing people and others picking up the extra load. So just be careful, guys. That's my advice to you. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments. Please leave a like, subscribe. Really helps the channel, really helps spread the message out there. And I'll catch you in the next one.